We're pulling out our crystal ball and looking into the future of short-term rentals with Alex Jarbo from BiggerPockets right here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Hey, I need to take a really quick break from this podcast. And if you are a loyal listener of the Fearless Investor Podcast, you're probably either a business owner or looking to start a business. And for that reason, you need to make sure you're doing things correctly, down to the T. From forming the correct LLC to bookkeeping to understanding the tax code and more. It's all really the boring stuff, but it can make or break your business. In fact, if you aren't doing it correctly, you could be like 98% of other business professionals in the US and overpay on taxes. Don't do that, guys. Be the 2%. And that's why I rely on Easier Accounting, and so should you. Easier Accounting is a team of tax professionals that will set up your LLC, keep your books, file your taxes, and they can even repair your credit. And just so you know, I myself use Easier Accounting, and this came after using a similar company that, really being blunt here, completely ripped me off. So when I started using Easier Accounting, I came in a little bit skeptical, but as I started talking to them, I could really tell they had my best interests at heart. And you know me, if I'm not a professional, I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to outsource that stuff. And I hope you will do the same and use that same mindset to hire professionals to help you form and manage your business. Easier Accounting is absolutely the way to go. Go check them out at fearlesskyle.com/easier accounting. What's up, Team Fearless? Kyle Stanley here, and we're talking with Alex Jarbo today about the future of short-term rentals. And do we know everything? No, we don't. And we're not going to give you any sort of guarantees about what the future is looking like, but we can take what's happened here in the last few years and apply it towards where we think this industry is going. And also, is it viable? Is it something you should get into? Is it something you should keep building on? Or is it something that maybe you start adjusting and looking at other exit strategies? Well, we're going to touch on all of that here right with Alex Jarbo on the Fearless Investor Podcast. Let's get to it. Hey guys, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. Really excited to have Alex Jarbo with BiggerPockets here. Alex, thanks for taking the time, man.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Kyle.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's get started with my favorite question. What's your craziest short-term rental story? You've been in the business for a little bit here.
Yeah, I would say my craziest one is actually my first one. Our first one that we ever purchased was actually, it was a development project. It was a 800 square foot A-frame. And the craziest story that came from that was we purchased the land. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. We needed an electricity easement from the neighbors, and we found that out after we started all of our building permits and got our building permits, and found out that none of the neighbors wanted to give us that electricity easement. So we pushed through, built the entire property. It was like a $200,000 build with a generator, and then we ended up figuring out the electricity issue. But for about 9 months, it was like looming over my head that we were going to have this property built, 200 grand plus furnishings, and no way to get electricity to it.
Oh my gosh. Why did the neighbors have so much power in that?
It was leading up a private driveway, and there was no HOA.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gotcha. It's funny. I've asked that question probably over 200 times now, and I would say like 50% of the answers are like that, either that first guest that someone ever hosted or that first deal that you do. So
yeah, it's never from like last month or last week. It's like, it's from my very first mistake. Yeah.
You never forget your first.
The biggest one. Yep.
Well, Alex, excited to have you on, man. Why don't you just kind of give everyone, before we jump in, an idea of what your business looks like today from just a real estate and short-term rental perspective?
Yeah, so I've been in development for the last 7 years now, and just developing unique short-term rentals. I originally served in the Marine Corps for 5 years. Last day I was mainly stationed in DC, part of the Honor Guard in DC. But literally my last day of the Marine Corps, left from DC directly to Asheville, North Carolina, where I live now, and started looking for properties. I got my real estate license when I first came here, and I practiced for about a couple of years. Was helping people purchase and sell short-term rentals, but I was always looking for something myself. And at that time, everything was either way out of my price range, or it was in my price range. It just wouldn't have done well as a short-term rental, maybe as a long-term rental midterm, but not
Okay.
like, wasn't anything unique or any type of curb appeal to me for those properties. So our first one was that A-frame that we built.
Nice.
800 square foot. It was in my budget at that time. You could get a 90% loan. It was like 4 or 5% interest rate. And once we built that one, saw how well it did. One turned into two really quickly, two turned into four, brought on some investor capital from some friends, built three or four more of them, four of them. And then I made the shift 2 years ago to purchasing and developing larger projects in the 7 to 20 range. And today, as we're talking, we're either developing, purchasing, or managing over $30 million worth of
Wow.
unique short-term rentals. Yep. Which
That's
I've actually
awesome.
never said on publicly on a podcast. The 30, I've said 10 million before last year, but never 30 million. Yeah.
Wow. So has there been that much growth over the last year that it's taken it from 10 to 30?
Yeah, I would say just a couple projects that we acquired pushed
Cool.
us over those limits, especially the one that we're going to be closing on in a couple months here. But yeah, that it's been an exponential growth, and with that has also come some growing pains on understanding hospitality in general, and essentially running a boutique, a scattered boutique hotel is what I call it. Is just like going to different, understanding the other platforms outside of just Airbnb and VRBO.
So $30 million, some of that is being developed though right now. How many do you currently have that are operating, and where are they located?
Yeah, they're all located here in the county of Asheville. Because in the city of Asheville, you can't do short-term rentals. You can't
Okay.
even get a license for them. So we've always operated within a 15-minute radius of downtown, and we've always gotten the appropriate permits for those. So right now we have 16 unique rentals. They range from 400 square foot all the way up to $2 million luxury rentals.
Wow.
And then we're going to be bringing on another 20, and then we're developing another 16 right now.
Awesome. There's so many questions I want to ask about, especially you mentioned being in the city is not allowed, but the county is allowed. A couple questions come to mind for me on that. But before we do, I just want to back up a little bit. So you were, before getting into real estate, serving in the Marine Corps. Were you doing anything before that? Was there any other jobs that you ever held before getting into real estate?
So yeah, I didn't have a I decided to join the Marine Corps when I was 16. Signed My parents had signed for me when I was 17 because I asked them to, and then literally I didn't even have a weekend or I didn't even have a summer vacation when I turned 18. I went to boot camp the week I graduated. Yeah, so I didn't do anything prior to that. I was a Marine Corps infantryman by trade, selected to be a part of the honor guard there in DC. And then I picked up real estate my last year in the Marine Corps, just reading all the BiggerPockets books, all the
Yep.
single, like, just long-term rental books and flipping books and stuff with my last year when I decided I didn't want to stay in. Joined a flipping mentorship like while I was still in the Marine Corps. And the gentleman that was in charge of that flipping mentorship, he had said, like, during like at the time it was like over the phone calls, like it was like group coaching but over the phone. And he had mentioned, this was back in 2015, that most of his long-term wealth, his holds, were actually short-term rentals. That's back in 2015.
2015,
So
yeah.
yeah, and so he was mainly, most of his rentals were in Gatlinburg at the time, and that really piqued my interest because it was consistent cash flow is what he was talking about, like flipping properties to get to that point. And I wanted to just get to that point without the flipping part. So yeah, I didn't really have a job before the Marine Corps. I went straight from Marine Corps, high school Marine Corps, to real estate. Yeah,
That's awesome,
and then
man.
I
I
got
mean,
I have my degrees in between there and stuff, but like, yeah, for the most part.
is
Yeah.
it crazy that, like, you started with listening and digesting things on Bigger Pockets, and now you are one of the guys at Bigger Pockets?
Yeah, it's pretty nuts, man. I mean, it's still pretty hard to believe. Like, I don't track any of the numbers. I'll comment on the stuff on my articles and stuff, but like I don't go out and they tell me like what my articles do in terms of reading, like how many people have read them and stuff, which is still mind blowing. But it's pretty cool to be interacting with like a lot of the authors as well, like David Green and Paul
Yeah.
Moore, which Paul Moore is the reason why I'm a part of Bigger Pockets, because he had made that intro. Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, we just had Henry on our show a couple weeks ago. So,
yeah, yeah.
the Bigger Pockets coaching community seems to have gotten a lot bigger. So it's cool to see that you're part of that, man.
Yeah,
Um,
man. Yeah, it's really cool.
and we also had Brian Page on here, and I know you're doing a few things with Brian. So before we get into more about what you're doing with your portfolio, how did that come about?
I was one of his students, man, back in 2016. I think, yeah, it's funny. I guess that's always been the route for me. But I think he launched BNB Formula to late 2016. I was I'm not gonna say one of the first students, but I had listened to him on the Mike Dillard podcast when I was, I think, here, or maybe I was still in the Marine Corps. And Yeah, I was one of his students when his core. I mean, I've said this before. When his core, he has a coaching program now, but when it was
Yeah.
just a course, I think the course was $1,000. And it was fed in drip, where it was like 8 weeks. You finish the week, you can't go on to the next week until you did that piece. And then I had reached out. I did a big podcast push last year when we were doing raising capital for our other deals. And I had reached out to him because he had a podcast. I'm like, hey man, I'm a student of yours. I'd love to hop on your podcast. This is what I'm working on. And he's like, I've actually put the podcast on hold, but he's like, do you want? I'm actually looking. He's like, I've launched the coaching side of the business. Do you want to be one of the coaches? We only have like 3 coaches, so yeah, that's slowly evolved into a really good friendship. And that was March of last year, and I mean, I've been putting in about 2 to 3 hours a week just for his community and whatnot. I mean, they have their Facebook community, I think, is touching, like when I checked this morning, it was like 6,000 members. So
That's awesome.
that's a very deep network there. But
Yeah. Well, all I can think of is the ad that always pops up whenever I go on Facebook, and him being
the Grant Cardone
on
one,
Grant Cardone. Yeah, yeah. We're
yeah,
talking
yeah,
serious
we
money.
talk
Yeah.
about that all the time. We actually
uh,
we just refilmed and so he lives in Charleston, and he flew the 7 coaches out, and we just
nice.
refilmed the entire coaching program.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
that's another thing that you just asked about, the BiggerPockets thing. Very weird to his course is one of the reasons why I got into short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Now I'm one of the coaches teaching one of the sections in the program. Is pretty nuts. Yeah, like we did it in a studio and everything. Yeah.
Full circle, man. That's crazy. But with him, he's talking a lot about arbitrage, and you basically mentioned that you're pretty much doing development and owning. Do you have any arbitrage at all in your
No,
portfolio?
all my arbitrage units went away during COVID. I mean, just like any
You
other
were okay.
place, they didn't go away because of COVID. My owners sold the properties because property value
Oh, okay.
doubled in our area, and it didn't make any sense to hold on to them. So I had 5 arbitrage units at that time, and I had that A-frame, and I was building.
Wow.
I was in the middle of finishing building 2 more and starting 2 more.
Wow.
So I was already in that transition from going from arbitrage into development, and COVID just accelerated that times 20. Yeah.
So, knowing that you were still doing developing, what was the value that you saw in arbitrage back then?
It was the quick cash flow,
Yeah.
man. I mean, that is, I don't recommend people getting directly into development or even purchasing. I mean, arbitrage is the fastest way to get into real estate, not even just short-term rentals.
Yep.
In my opinion, there's no other, instead of purchasing a property for a long-term rental, you can sign a lease with an owner and just get into the property. As long as you've done your numbers correctly, you can start cash flowing from month 1 or 2.
A lot of people, we're even doing Q&As in this group for our 6-figure formula. A lot of people are asking me, hey, what are you doing now that arbitrage is dying? And, my response is, it's not dying. It's just that instead of there being 10 out of 10 deals that you look at on Zillow, like you did in 2020 and 2021, it's now 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. There's still money to be made. How do you see it? Is there still great opportunity? How would you kind of evaluate the opportunity of arbitrage today?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna say gone are the days of like just like the say the last, like the biggest shift that has happened in the arbitrage world is just like, I'm just gonna get this random single wide or whatever, this random property. I'm just gonna list it on Airbnb, and it's just gonna start cash flowing from day one. Now you actually have to do your homework on the deal. You actually have to underwrite it properly. You actually have to look at the market. You have to look at the area. So stuff like that. Going multi-platform is another important part to that compared to just throwing it on Airbnb. But we were just talking about before we went live, like just going, like treating it like a business. You're not
Mhm.
in Airbnbs. Like when people ask you what business are you, and you shouldn't be saying I'm in Airbnbs. You own a vacation rental company. You own a hospitality company. So yeah, I mean there are always going to be those people that are saying this is dead, and usually those are the people that their business is struggling where they didn't do their homework to start with.
Yeah. So that's where I think we can kind of transition here. When you talk about this, big shift that's coming, and especially when you look at the importance of someone needing to know how they're underwriting deals, how to be able to evaluate the property properly. What do you see that's already happened up until now that shifted since the day that you started?
Yeah,
So
I would
just
say
going to present day here.
yeah, it's the people are using property management softwares, PMSs, and then going multi-platform. That's the biggest shift that's happened in BNB Formula. Brian's group is
Mhm.
that when it first started, he never touched on any of the other platforms. Compared to now, you have to look at Airbnb. I've always said this though. I've said this the last couple of years. Airbnb is just a marketing channel. It is where
Mhm.
the eyeballs are at. So find other channels where other eyeballs are at. So that's been the biggest shift that I've seen is we've pushed our students to go multi-platform. I've pushed students or I've pushed people on the BiggerPockets articles to go multi-platform and to choose a PMS and go from there. Still start with just one PMS or start with just one booking channel so you're not getting overwhelmed, but like understand that like the progression to get into different ones. And then also actually designing like get caring about the interior design of the property and actually like making sure that it has good curb appeal is very important because as we know, it doesn't matter if you're in development, if you're purchasing, if you're doing rental arbitrage, those pictures sell the property. That is
Yeah.
what, especially now with Airbnb changing, getting rid of titles or at least not making titles as important as they used to be. Pictures are what sell your property. So just making sure that it has curb appeal on the inside and outside is very important too.
So going outside of the teaching to students, I'm wanting to know what's been different in your business. What are the trends that you've seen with the properties that you have in your portfolio? Like, Freddie mentioned here in the comments that he's seen shorter lead times on bookings. Some people have talked about lower occupancy, lower rates, having to upgrade their properties. What are the things that you've seen that you've either had to adjust to,
Yeah.
or that, just straight up results that are different from a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I love this question, man, and I've avoided asking answering this question in the past or writing on it because I didn't want to seem like I was like bragging and just saying like blah blah blah, like the business has gotten so big. But the biggest shift in my business has been the switch to like I call them micro resorts, is like the 7 units that are the cabin communities that are together, or like the community that we're purchasing in the next couple months, the 20 units.
Nice.
That's been the biggest shift, man. Is that when you start going into the micro resort community, like micro resort area, or you have like more than 3 4 5 properties, you're able to get these properties onto like a booking channel like Expedia. And Expedia is massive. I mean, Expedia owns VRBO and it also owns 10 to 15 other channels, so you're exposed on that side. And also when it comes to regulations, because that is a question that's always been that has always been a topic since before I started, is the regulations just keep getting stricter. I mean,
Yeah.
Hawaii had completely banned short-term rentals this year, I believe. And the when you start doing these larger properties, the regulations actually do get easier. We're like the property that we're purchasing in a couple months, it has indefinite conditional use zoning from the county. Some of the coaches that I coach with in BNB Formula have gone out and gotten hotel permits on some of the multifamily deals that they do. So the biggest shift in my business has been focusing on these larger cabin communities or like
Yeah.
micro resort communities, because there's also economies of scale there when it comes to like paying a cleaning company. It's way cheaper to send someone out to clean 3 properties than it is one that, say it's like 6 properties that are scattered throughout the county or through the market.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned something there about when your buddies are getting like hotel permits and being able to do that with multifamily properties. I'm hearing that a lot recently, that short-term rentals, even though it feels kind of like the same thing as hotels, it's really not, especially from a zoning perspective. Do you see kind of across the board that there's opportunities that if I have a 3 unit, a 4 unit, or like you mentioned, 7 units or bigger, that most cities allow you to turn that from its zone
Yeah,
short-term
and
rental or zone
yeah,
multifamily to a hotel?
from what I've seen from my students and from everything that I've talked to with everyone in my community. I mean, we go to the same conferences and everything, and talking to people that are doing the larger stuff. It's easier to get that hotel permit than in some cities than it is to get that short-term rental permit or that short-term
Mm.
rental complex permit. I've talked to a lot of people that like they just completely skirt they don't even think about short-term rental laws because they're like, I'm just getting this hotel permit, I'm getting this complex permit, which to me has like in my county you can get a short-term rental complex permit, which is anything more than 3 units that are right next to each other. I've gotten 3 of those. I've never gotten a no from my county, and the board members is 7. So it's like I've gotten 21 to 0 yeses on my complex permits, and that's for development. But those have always been easier than if I can't get a permit in Asheville for short-term rentals, period. And
Yeah.
it's like, but I can get that permit pretty easily.
So have you ever heard of anyone getting a hotel permit for one house, a single family house,
A
or
hotel? No, I
their port?
haven't. No,
Okay.
no.
I've
Yeah,
heard some rumblings about that. I don't
like
know if it.
almost like a B&B is what you're saying, like where
I
they do
don't
the
even know, but I know
Airbnb.
someone who manages about 30 properties. This was actually in San Diego, and she said that because they're all single family houses, but they're under her management, that she could get a hotel permit
Oh, for
for
all
her
of them.
entire portfolio because she
Yeah,
met some of the minimum requirements. And I was like, okay,
interesting. Yeah,
that's
I've
interesting.
never heard of
Yeah.
that, but I mean, it makes sense. So, like
Yeah.
in my state of North Carolina, you need to get technically you should have a real estate license. So, I mean, I've never heard of that, but I mean, that's an argument could be made to the county for that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just a conditional use permit.
That'd be interesting to look more into.
Yeah. So it's like
So
you're motivated to build your business to that
exactly.
scale. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So talk a little bit more about the regulations where you're at. So I'm always, here's what I always look at. Like if I could not do short-term rentals tomorrow, then I need to know that that property is either going to be worth more than it's worth the day that I buy it. So adding some value, or I can cash flow as a long-term rental. And then maybe if I wanted to get deep into the midterm rental space, I could potentially go there. But I'd like to see those two exit strategies along with short-term rentals right now. Is there anything that scares you with the way that your business model is set up, that if the city now expands to the county of Asheville, are you losing any of your business, or have you set it up in a way with these different strategies and different permits that you're not going to be affected by that?
When I first started the underwriting it as a long-term rental for those individual units, where it's like onesie and twosies that are scattered, that's how we underwrote them. We underwrote them as long-term rentals just in case that happened.
Nice.
Some areas are so expensive you can't do that anymore. When we got into those larger ones with I mean, those I would be very surprised. When Asheville changed their laws, they did grandfather the short-term rental permits that were already on file. And they ran with the property, so it actually made those properties really valuable because if they sold them, they can sell that permit. So with our larger projects, the largest one has indefinite conditional use zoning that runs with the property. That unless if something crazy happens, which we'll probably sue the city for, they can't take that away. And then for our short-term rental complex permit properties, I see them getting grandfathered in the same way they did in Asheville with the permits. So I'm not really worried too much there because our smaller properties were underwritten as long-term rentals and they're unique in a way that we feel really confident that we'll cash flow something if we ever did need to go that route. I would personally just sell them. The reason why I keep them right now is just because they cash flow like crazy. I mean, that first A-frame after all debt service and payments and all the expenses and everything, that one cash flows about last year cash flowed $54,000 net
Wow.
after everything. And it's 800
Wow.
square foot A-frame. So I would we keep on I hold on to those one property that's in the mountain and we have a couple other cabins that are just like that too that do just a little bit less than that. Um, but I would sell them off because I mean I run those numbers all the time. I'm looking at my personal financial statement. I'm going like, okay, this property is worth this much compared to like what the debt is on it. We could sell it and make this much, but I don't know. I'm just in a point in my life where I like the cash flow compared to just
Yeah.
like cashing out completely. I don't need to. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the key thing, is that you underwrote these deals kind of the same way that I was talking about, where you know that if anything goes, if shit hits the wall, then you're going to be good because it's going to be worth more than it's worth now. It's going to rent as a long-term rental. I think, a friend of mine just sent me a video on Instagram about Kissimmee in Orlando, and like, how there's now double the amount of listings on the MLS in Orlando and in that area. And they're all, if you look at them, furnished short-term rentals. And they're like, yeah, it's a great investment opportunity, right? But what happened there was everyone bought them and they only cash flow to short-term rentals. They're buying $1 million properties, and there's no way that this is going to
Yeah,
work as
it's
a
like
long-term rental.
it's like comparing it to 2008 where people were just
Yeah.
purchasing property on appreciation. They're like, "This is gonna continue to appreciate." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you need an I mean, w with dealing even with these larger properties and talking to these more sophisticated investors, I'll tell you guys the number one question that comes up is like, "What's the exit?" That's the first
Yeah.
question that comes up. So that's always what you should be thinking about is like, you never dream about your business ending or like selling a property, but you always have to be thinking about the exit in mind when in whatever business you're getting into, especially the vacation rental markets.
Well,
I would add
especially,
one more thing to that
yeah.
too, which is the I've always invested in properties that are more drive-in properties, so 15 to 20 minutes to downtown where they're a little bit more rurals. When I first started, I did that out of necessity because I just couldn't afford being downtown. But I think a really powerful strategy is to invest in you see it in the data. If you look at the AirDNA data, the rural markets are the markets that are doing better right now than the more centralized downtown markets.
Mm.
And I think it's a pretty safe bet. Again, it's the United States is really big, and then if you go global, it's even obviously bigger. So I don't like putting blanket statements out there, but it's pretty safe to say that you can invest in a short-term rental market that's historically been a short-term rental market before Airbnb and VRBO existed, where you had to pick up the phone to book a reservation. Those are always going to be good
Yeah.
vacation rental markets. Again, doing your numbers and underwriting them properly. But historically, if it was a vacation rental market, like say 30 years ago, that is a market that more than likely the rules will never change in that market.
So we've talked a little bit about underwriting and how that's changed. We've talked about regulations and how those are getting more intense. We've talked about a lot of different kind of how things have changed. But let's get that glass ball out and let's look into the
Okay.
future, right?
Yeah.
Let's be and give everyone 100% guarantee that this is exactly what's going to happen, right? No, but giving our guests our best guess, where do you see this industry in, let's just go with the short term, a year from now, 3 years from now? Like, where does this industry go and how are people going to need to adjust?
Yeah, so I started making this prediction on BiggerPockets. Was the first time I started talking about it last year in October, and then I was talking about it on podcasts like early of last year as well. That I was making the prediction before Airbnb made their switch to their categories that people are going to be looking for more unique stays. That doesn't just mean the structure. I'm not telling you to go out and just dive headfirst into development the way I did, but there has to be something unique about your property, whether it be themed in a certain way or something that is not social media friendly. But again, it draws people in with the pictures. People are looking for more of a unique stay where the property itself is an experience outside of the city that they're vacationing to. And I made that prediction last year in their summer update. Like Airbnb broke the world with those categories that everyone still talks about. But if you look at those categories, people can sort now based off of the unique rentals that
Mhm.
they like, based off of unique rentals that they can book. So I think that's going to continue going into year like next year, 3 years, 5 years. People are looking for those Instagrammable properties, something that they'd be proud to put on their social media and show other people, where your guest essentially turns into your little marketing machine to show their friends and their family and their inner circle and stuff.
Okay. So unique properties. Is there anything else that you want to forecast?
Yeah, I mean the hot I would say, we already touched on it briefly is treating your vacation rentals like a business. You're not in Airbnbs. I look at it as hospitality. Half of these books behind me, not half of them, I'd say maybe 15 of them, they're hospitality books. There's a really good book written by Disney called Be Our Guest that is just a hospitality book. So understanding hospitality principles, hotel principles on like just how to manage a hotel does correlate to your vacation rental business. Going multi-platform, getting like a property management software, you need to be on multiple platforms going forward, just more eyeballs on your property. Yeah.
So we talk about direct bookings all the time. And I know that, you've got your direct booking site. And first of all, really quick question. What percentage of your bookings right now would you say are direct?
They're only about, I would say about 15 to 20% right now.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is pretty
So
impressive. I feel like most people I ask that to, it's like 5 to 10%. So the
I'll
biggest
plug Boostly in there. Mark Simpson from
oh, yeah.
Boostly.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
really,
we're
really good.
always talking about Mark. He's the
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
Um, the biggest question I ask or I get asked when it comes to direct bookings comes from fear of insurance, right? Like, I don't know if I have this direct booking, if that person throws a party or if that person does X, Y, and Z, I'm not covered with the Airbnb, air cover, yada, yada. So, talk to that really quick and how you tackle that in your own business.
yeah. There are services out there that offer that same exact insurance, if not better. Oh my gosh, it's slipping. I'm not remembering the service that we use. Um,
We use Safely.
oh my gosh, there's another one that Mark Simpson actually he introduced me to the gentleman that owns the company, and that's what we use. But yeah, I mean, Safely is another really good one. This company will I don't know how Safely does it, but they'll reach out to the guest for you, like the
Yeah.
same like Airbnb for the most part makes you do it. They
Yeah.
make you reach out, tell them what damage they done, and then if they deny it, then they step in. This company, those types of companies handle all of that. So yeah, I mean, you can get those exact policies, if not better, for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
For it's called Superhog. It just came
I
to me.
was
We
I
use
was gonna
Superhog.
ask if it was Super Hog.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, so yeah, that's. I mean, you can just get that insurance relatively cheaply, and that helps you sleep at night as well because you get to it's a they go through a vetting process, and if you're using a Boostly site again, I'm plugging them again. They you can I mean, they're integrated pretty easily with their sites.
Cool. I was about to ask this question, but Joe just commented with it. What other platforms are you listing on? So you got your direct booking. You talked about VRBO. I heard you mention Expedia and Airbnb. Is there anything else?
Yeah, booking.com. Expedia you can get on. I forgot what their threshold is. I don't know if it's 3, 4. We the first time we stepped into Expedia was with a 7-unit property.
Hmm.
But they look for properties that are like almost like micro resorts or hotel, boutique
Got it.
hotel type properties. But in my opinion, Expedia is like either above Airbnb or just slightly below because of how many other channels they own. They own
Hmm.
hotels.com, they own VRBO flat out, and they obviously they're Expedia.com. But yeah, I'm listed on those other sites. If you guys have never heard of, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called House. Is it House.com? There are free direct booking sites out there that you can put your property on, and then that's how I started. I started with using StayFi, which is like an email capture tool
Right.
in the property, and then we remarketed to them through StayFi to that free direct booking site.
There you
Yeah.
go. And just to pause really quick, guys, if you're listening here live in the Six Figure Formula, or if you're listening on recording on the podcast or YouTube channel, we're mentioning a lot of these softwares and a lot of
Yeah.
these partners are actually discount partners with us in the Six Figure Formula. So Boostly, Safely, StayFi,
Yep.
AirDNA for underwriting your deals. All of this is here. You get discounts, exclusive discounts. So make sure you're checking those out. If you're not a part of the Six Figure Formula, go check it out. fearlesskyle.com/6FF to get those discounts. All right. So
And they're
unique
they're all
properties.
services we use, guys. So yeah,
Say that again.
they're all services we use like in our
Yeah.
business. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and the majority of people need to use them. At least AirDNA and Price Labs right out of the gate if you got your first property.
yeah,
Uh,
dynamic pricing for sure.
for sure. All right. So unique properties, uh, keeping up with regulations, and being multi-platform. This all sounds like stuff that I know we're talking about with a lot of high level uh, coaches, a lot of high level operators. A lot of them are talking about what do you see if tomorrow Airbnb just disappears, right? They get sued, they're gone. Do you see your business the way that it's currently structured being able to survive? And if not, what do you need to do right away to make sure that it does?
Yeah, so it's the whole idea of like digging your well before you need it. We've been collecting emails through StayFi since
Yeah.
the first time I heard of StayFi in 2018, 19. So it's like we've been building that email list ever since then.
Cool.
We would literally just crank. I mean, we're continuing to do that right now. Our goal is not to rely on the OTAs. I mean, that is Mark Simpson's message from the beginning. But just outside of that is again treating it like a business. you're building an email list with your previous guests, and then you're remarketing to them and treating it like a business to a direct booking site, where the goal is to not rely on the OTAs completely. So that is what I would do if everything went to crap tomorrow, is just accelerate that, is start marketing even heavier through the SMS and through the email marketing and whatnot that StayFi already offers.
Awesome. All right, Alex, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure to talk about? I know you've got a deal coming up.
Yep.
You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're in the middle of raising. It's a in my opinion, it's the top vacation rental property in the country right now. I don't know if you guys have. I'm sure some people have seen it. It's gone viral multiple times on social media, but it's a treehouse community right in my backyard here. There's 7 current units, and they're building out another 13 with a wedding venue. And we're in the middle of closing that right now. We have it under contract. We've done all of our due diligence, appraisals, inspections, all that fun stuff. We've been negotiating it since February of this year. But that one, I'm not gonna say what the price tag is on that right now because it'll give people a heart attack. But we're in the middle of we just built an entire website that was actually built by Boostly just for the property itself, and then we're in the middle of raising the money. So that website is openatlas.investments, no .com, just openatlas.investments. If you guys are listening to this live, it's not live yet. The website will go live this Friday.
Spell that out for me.
Open Atlas.
Atlas. So like a map atlas.
Yeah, Open Atlas, and then .investments with an S.
Investments. Openatlas.investments.
Yep. Yeah, Open Atlas is our management, our rental, and 2 separate, same name. Open Atlas Rentals, Open Atlas Investments.
Okay, cool. So we're recording this on August 16th. You're saying this will be live by August 18th?
Yep.
Cool. I just put that in the comments, guys. For those of you that are listening to this on recording, hey, it's already live because we released this a couple weeks after we record it live. So openatlas.investments, go check it out if you want to be a part of this deal. Where you're saying that this thing has already gone viral a few times. So what would we Google search? Just treehouse community Nashville?
Yeah.
Nashville?
So I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan. I can't speak on it because they've actually been slapped a couple times by Warner Brothers, but they have 2 Harry Potter tree houses. One that is
Okay.
It has a 20-foot slide in it. It's a tent that slide and then down. That one's
Cool.
I think that one has over 30 million views on TikTok. That's gone viral like 4 or 5 times. Another thing we didn't talk about is just like with these unique properties, how tapping into social media marketing and social media influencers, like traveling influencers, we're doing that very heavily on one of our properties already. We have a 6-figure budget a year set aside just for this property alone. But this property has been covered by Mike Iannetta, Levi Kelly, all the bigger influencers. And they've already been out there. I flew Mike Iannetta out to film the investor video for this property. That came out really, really, really well.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, where else can people find your content? We talked about BiggerPockets, but what about Instagram? Any social handles?
Yeah, BiggerPockets. That's where the social media the social media channel I'm most involved in. LinkedIn, you guys can look me up. I haven't been posting as frequently as I should be on YouTube, but you guys can look at my personal Instagram channel, just Alex Jarbo, just really simple.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for helping our audience to conquer the world of short-term rentals and looking into a glass, looking into the future for us.
Yeah, man.
All right, man. Well, and for those of you that are in the 6-figure formula, we're going to keep it right here. I see all of your questions. Alex is going to answer those. If you are not, what are you waiting for? Jump in so that you can be in this exclusive group and ask people like Alex questions every single week when we have them on the podcast. Thanks for being here, Alex.
Oh, thanks, everyone.
So again, that website is already live for you. It's past August 18th. That means it's ready to be viewed. So go check it out if you're interested in being a part of that deal with Alex over in Asheville. That's going to do it for us right now here on the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll see you next time.